Can you paint on paper with oil? The answer is absolutely. And once you see how, you might wonder why you didn't start sooner. But unlike other mediums, oil paints can seep through and destroy the paper if you're not careful. So in this video, I am walking you through everything you need to know, using the right surface, how to prepare your pages, why I personally choose to paint on paper, and why sketchbooks might just become your new favorite place to paint. To make things easier, I have timestamped each section that I cover, so if you want to skip ahead, feel free to do so. Otherwise, let's start from the top with the types of paper to use. The number one question I am always asked on social media, especially when I flip through my sketchbooks, is what book is that? I've been painting in sketchbooks for years, and over time I've collected several different brands, so let's go through them and weigh the pros and cons for all. This video is not sponsored, so any product I recommend here I genuinely use and enjoy. First, we have my favorite sketchbook, which is the Stillman Birn Zeta series. And as you can see, I'm a little bit obsessed. This isn't even my full collection either, I have more. Stillman Birn exclusively produces sketchbooks, meaning this is literally all they do. They have 7 different types of sketchbooks, all with different weights, finishes, and colors, so let's go through what all of that means. Let's start with the weight first. Reputable sketchbooks and watercolor papers will specifically state the weight of the paper on the packaging, which will either be in pounds or GSMs, which stands for grams per square meter. Basically, all you need to remember is that the higher the number, the thicker the paper. If you're planning to paint in thick, heavy applications, you're going to want that number to be as high as possible to prevent the paper from buckling. Then we have the finish of the paper itself. Paper typically comes in 2 finishes, hot press and cold press. When paper is turned from pulp into a sheet, it's pressed between 2 rollers. If those rollers are hot, then all of the texture is steamed out and the surface is nice and smooth. If the rollers are cold, then the paper keeps its original fibrous texture, which is kind of pebbly. This actually serves a practical purpose. Because of the texture, cold pressed paper is more absorbent and has softer edges when the paint dries, since the paint is dispersed more quickly through the surface. This makes it ideal for watercolor and creates those beautiful, soft, loose edges where the paint dries. Hot press paper is very smooth, so it more closely mimics a canvas, and since the surface is less absorbent, it's better for oil painting since we don't actually want that oil to sink into the paper. I do think it's important to also very quickly note that the best art supply is the one that you already have on hand, and it's totally fine to use cold press paper for oil painting if you already happen to have some. Lots of artists do it. Finally, we have the color of the paper. Although white is the default and maybe what you think of for a sketchbook, many companies have sketchbook series that come in different colors. The most popular colors that I've come across, aside from white, are beige, gray, and black. This is ideal for artists who like to work on a colored or toned canvas, and I'm actually very keen to start testing out 2-toned sketchbooks that I recently picked up. I'll show you more about these in a moment. But first, let's go back to the Zeta series, which is my current favorite. The Zeta has the heaviest weight paper in the line, coming in at 270 GSM. It has white hot press paper, which I can tone with acrylic inks if I want to paint on a colored background. Here's the Zeta series with burnt umber on one spread and Prussian blue on another. All of Stillman Birn's sketchbooks come in a multitude of different sizes with both hard and soft covers, but I am currently quite partial to this size and style, which is a size A4 with a hard cover. You can also get these with a coil binding, but I find that even with this type of binding, the pages are really good at lying flat. I also have the Beta series, which has cold press paper and I have yet to use, and I'm going to be testing out the Nova series soon. The Nova has paper that's lighter than the Zeta at 150 GSM, but still has a nice medium grain surface and a gorgeous toned tan color. I am super pumped to try this, and I think I'm going to try some landscapes and florals in here. Now, just in case Stillman Birn isn't available where you are, or you've tried it before and maybe it's not your cup of tea, I do have some other brands to show you. The first is the Strathmore journal, which I have both in watercolor and the multimedia. I use the larger size of the watercolor journal for my acrylic painting sketchbook, and I use the smaller size as my workbook in my color mixing with acrylic course. This book has 300 GSM paper and a cold press finish, so as you can see, it's very thick, very textured, and you can use cold press paper outside of watercolor. The multimedia has a smooth finish with 190 GSM, so it's slightly heavier than the Nova and still a great choice. Two other reputable sketchbook brands that have a cult-like following are the Moleskine and Hanamule, both of which I have. I just haven't tried them yet, which is why they're still in their packaging. But if you have these and you like them, please let all of us know in the comments. I love hearing from you. Now, I've been focusing on sketchbooks, but you can also paint on standard watercolor paper like Arches, but like any paper that we've covered so far, you just need to make sure that it's properly treated before using it. Which brings us to the next and most important step, preparing the paper. If you watched nothing else in this video, please watch this section. But quickly before we do that, I also have a free oil painting ebook that you can download below. It's 28 pages, gives a full introduction to the medium, and as I mentioned, it's completely free. Sealing your paper before painting in oil is hands down the most important step in your process. Oil paint will destroy a paper surface slowly over time unless it's properly prepared. You may not see it next week or even next year, but as time wears on, it will slowly eat away at the paper, turning it brittle and eroding the fibers of the page. Now, this book that I'm about to show you is also a Zeta series. It's a soft cover, and here is an example of a page that I didn't prepare. I was rushing, I just wanted to get this color wheel done, so I threw it on an unprepared page with nothing underneath it. Now, it took a few weeks for it to show up, but there is now a big oil stain on the opposite side. And over time, now we're talking years to decades, this will continue to degrade the paper. So this is not considered archival. So to avoid this, always prepare your pages, even if you're in a rush. Here's how to do it. First, choose your sealant. The ones that I have tried include a spray shellac, acrylic matte medium, and a Michael Harding non-absorbent acrylic primer. Now, we will talk about gesso briefly, but I mostly don't use it. The spray shellac was the first medium that I ever tried, so we're gonna start here. Like all of the products that I am about to show you, this works by creating a non-porous barrier on the page, which means that the oils can't sink through it into the paper itself. Shellac is a naturally occurring resin, which is why it's often used to finish furniture and why you're more likely to find this in a hardware store instead of an art store. My experience working with shellac is that because it's a resin, it has a thicker, smoother finish than the other mediums I'll be showing you. It's almost like the resin fortifies the paper since it hardens when it dries. This also has a bit of a glossy finish, which may or may not be to your preference. Now, you can also buy shellac in liquid form, which is cheaper, but I prefer the spray because this doesn't disturb my drawing, whereas when I brush it on, this dissolves the ink. One of the advantages to using shellac is that it applies quickly and easily. You can apply your second coat after only 30 to 60 minutes and paint on top of it after 24 hours. I always like to do 2 coats just to be careful, regardless of the medium I'm using. Now, the downside of all of this is because shellac is a resin, it's a little more brittle and it can darken over time. It also has a very strong smell when applied, and you definitely don't want to spray this indoors, which can make this difficult to use in the winter or if you don't have easy outdoor access. But I have personally used shellac on multiple sketchbook spreads. I do like it, and it's certainly worth trying if you don't like the other options that I'm about to share with you. Next, we have matte medium. This is probably the most commonly used by artists because it's reasonably affordable, you can find it at any art store, and it's completely safe to apply indoors. I like to apply this to my pages with a foam brush since it keeps the finish even and doesn't leave any brush strokes. You're gonna wanna do at least 2 coats of this, potentially 3, just to make sure you didn't miss any spots, as the matte medium can sometimes be hard to see. Now, a couple of notes on this stuff. First, I do find that the pages buckle a little more with the matte medium instead of shellac. The shellac dries so fast since it's a spray application, so it's almost like the pages don't really get the chance to buckle as much, whereas the matte medium takes a little longer to dry. However, if you're using a really good quality sketchbook or watercolor paper, as long as you tape or clip the paper down, you'll be training it to lie flat while the medium is drying. Usually I secure my pages with binder clips just because they're cheap and effective, but if you're using painter's tape to create a border, that would work well too. Next, we have the Michael Harding Non-Absorbent Primer. This stuff has a cult following, and I'm going to explain why. Unlike gesso, which has a little bit of absorbency, this is specifically a non-absorbent ground, meaning that you can use this on paper or your canvases instead of gesso, and it prevents the oils from sinking in. Sinking in is what happens when your oil paint goes dull as it dries, typically because the oil in the paint has been absorbed by the gesso. While you can fix that by oiling out your painting, which restores the same luster that you would get when you varnish, when you use a product like this, you don't actually have to, so your colors will retain their brightness and clarity straight from the get-go. Now, one thing to be mindful about this stuff is that it does have a bit of a gritty texture, so it is a different experience painting on this compared to the shellac or the matte medium. Price-wise, this is about the same as what you would pay for matte medium. If the price is making you feel a little twitchy, just remember that this will last a while, and I've had mine for years. The Michael Harding comes in all different kinds of colors. Mine is clear just because I thought that would be the most versatile, but you can also get this in white, burnt sienna, and a ton of other colors. Now, I am already anticipating that some of you may be wondering if you can use gesso instead of the 3 choices that I've outlined. The answer is that yes, you absolutely can, but just be warned, it's a little more porous than the other choices, so it could potentially cause uneven drying and sinking in. However, if this is the only option for you, gesso is much better than nothing at all, and it will protect the paper. Just make sure to do a few coats of this to seal that paper as much as possible. And if you want to be super careful, you can layer gesso with matte medium, doing the matte medium first and then the gesso. This will give you the texture and feeling of gesso while knowing that the surface of your paper is completely sealed. I do use gesso when I'm painting on paper with acrylic. I just personally prefer the other choices when I'm painting in oil. Now, if I had to recommend only one choice, it would 100% be the matte medium. However, I am going to be running more tests with this Michael Harding stuff soon, so we'll see. So now that we've gone over various papers and how to seal them properly, let's talk about why you might even want to paint on paper in the first place, because for me, this is where the magic happens. Pure and simple, painting on paper is fun. It's low stakes, low pressure, and if it doesn't turn out, who cares? Now, I feel like everyone might benefit from hearing this. Not every idea for a painting deserves a canvas or a place on the wall. For example, I really wanted to paint these donuts from the local bakery because I thought they were pretty and it would be fun to do. But I really don't want these on a canvas on my wall, and I don't necessarily think that this as a painting would sell. So by putting them into my sketchbook, it allowed me to bring the idea to life, but now I'm not stuck with it on a canvas somewhere. I actually have a lot of paintings and ideas like that. My acrylic sketchbook is full of landscapes that I have no interest in turning into a larger painting to sell, but creating them help me practice, try out different color combinations, and just experiment. So I personally paint on paper because I can basically do whatever I want, and that is liberating. I also like how the paintings look as a collection, especially when you flip through them, and they're so easy to store on a shelf. I never have to worry about if I have enough room in my studio since they barely take up any space. You can also keep a sketchbook for studies of paintings that you are planning to turn into a larger work on a canvas. Doing studies and miniatures of larger paintings has long been a practice of master artists, so if you do them in a sketchbook, it's almost like you'll get a little scrapbook of your work that you can keep forever. My sketchbooks are so precious to me, and I guarantee that if you start painting on paper, these almost become an extension of yourself, like a living memory of who you were in that exact moment that you painted in it. If you have any questions or you have your own painting on paper techniques that you'd like to share, please feel free to leave me a comment. Otherwise, I have linked my favorite oil painting tutorials here, and I would love if you check them out. Don't forget to grab your free ebook, and happy painting!